last night's win over the San Antonio Spurs, Solid Sun sprinkling in some new actions that they've been unveiling over the course of the last few games. And they've also sprinkled in a little bit more of operating from spaces on the floor that they typically didn't venture to quite that often prior to the addition of Kevin Durant. So let's go ahead and kind of just dive into those things that we saw in last night's win. All right, firstly, we're going to see them getting into this little bit of, it's like a wedge action here. So we see initially it's Chris setting a zipper screen, a pin down screen for Kevin Durant just to get him established at the elbow. And that's the wedge part of it. And then Chris, instead of clearing to the opposite side, he then relocates to the wing, but below the free throw line. And then they flow into a two-man game in the empty corner between him and Kevin Durant. That's going to get a switch because of the angle, and then Chris is going to stretch that switching defender out to get to the mismatch on a little elbow mid-post touch here for Kevin Durant. And that, by nature of the switch, is almost always going to induce some type of double team, whether it's from the passer, whether it's from the baseline, whether it's from the diagonal. They're going to send two to the ball. That's exactly what the Suns run this play for. And on the second side, we're going to shift our focus to DeAndre Ayton, who's playing the opposite dunker spot of Kevin Durant, and Josh Okogie, who's playing in the wing. They're in the corner field on that side, spacing-wise. Look at the process from DeAndre Ayton. They're zoned up on the second side as his man leaves to double-team KD from the baseline. And look at DeAndre Ayton fighting for positioning here. This pass would have been tough to make because of the size of Ayton's original matchup coming at Kevin Durant as a moving target. That wingspan makes that window tough to get to. Kevin Durant could have made this pass if he really, really wanted to, but instead, because of the timing of the cut from Josh Okogie, splitting the defenders and gapping the zone on the second side, he's able to get an easier pass and then allow for Okogie to then play connector over to DeAndre Ayton. And Ayton doesn't make this, but he does hit the two free throws following. You see the shot quality that's generated from the mid-post touch from Durant. So they go back to it on the very next possession. The wedge action, you see a little wedge screen from CP3. Him and Durant go back to the same positions as they did in the last play. They're going to go into the empty corner pick and roll. This time, the Spurs do a better job of navigating it. Also, the angle is not as steep and hard to navigate as it was in the first one. We talked about the last one being below the free throw line, making the angle hard to navigate. This one is above it. Makes it easier and less compromising for the defense, even though it is an empty corner still. But the Suns flow into a second side action here. It's a kick over from CP3 to Devin Booker in the opposite slot, and that immediately flows into a step-up screen from DeAndre Ayton. And then they're able to play out of that, and we see Durant looking a lot like he did to close out that Oklahoma City game, spotting up on the second side, specifically from the left side of the floor, which had tipped to David, the 4-point play. If you don't follow his work, definitely tap in with it. But we're going to zoom it back in and then go back to it. So we see the step-up screen from Ayton. We see Devin Booker immediately coming off. And the play is so effective going to the second side because now it's tilting the responsibilities of the defense. So where Kevin Durant's man originally would have just been, sitting on him, now because there's a pick and roll, he immediately becomes the low man. So he goes from trying to contain the ball to now being the low man. So now because he's a low man and Ayton setting the screen, Ayton's roll gravity comes into effect here. As Devin Booker comes off of that screen, we see Kevin Durant's man sink into the paint as the low man. He's jabbing that. But again, like we talked about with Chris Paul's processing, Devin Booker does a great job of locating the low man and hitting this skip pass here to Kevin Durant, who's spaced properly on this play at the perfect angle. Devin Booker hits him with a timely pass, a fireball as well, and they're able to beat the rotation, and KD's playing a catch and shoot, where he's north of 60% as a Phoenix Sun this season. All right, and then we're going to get into another rep here in the empty corner with Chris Paul. And this time it's going to end up being their 77 double screen action. But we're going to look at it and zoom in a little bit more because as we see and we let it kind of flow through more, it's going to flow into, on the second side, they don't get anything. So what do? They just flow and they respace the court. You see DeAndre Ayton emptying that side for Devin Booker to get, like we started with, a mid-post touch. In isolation, they empty the entire corner, giving the freelancing space to work with. Also gives them the space to read the help defense. They're never going to leave the gaps clean when Devin Booker has a mid-post touch here, not unlike they would do with Kevin Durant. So as we see here, we see Booker turn to face, then he's going to kind of sweep through, and he's eventually going to go baseline. He's reading DeAndre Ayton's man again because his man is the closest at the rim. He wants to put pressure on the rim in this situation, which is exactly what he's going to do once he elects to go baseline. He gets doubled on the block on the dribble drive. The Suns get the Spurs defensive dominoes to start rotating and falling. And this pass here to hook it around to go to the top of the key from Devin Booker, this is unbelievable. Unbelievable. Just the ability to get the pass off, in addition to the ability to get it there in an accurate and timely manner for Chris Paul to get into a catch and shoot. And he's able to knock that down. That's a shot that Chris Paul is knocking down at 50% since the All-Star break. He's 16 for 32. All right, and then on this next rep here, we're going to see, again, another mid-post touch here, this time for Kevin Durant. A lot lower this time as well. Being lower allows for him to have a better angle of processing and seeing what's going on from the floor, whether it's help defense or if they send a double. So this location is specific to play to the advantage of his playmaking out of getting two to the ball. So the Spurs initially don't send it as heavy, and because they're just kind of soft double teaming, as you see, Gorgie Jane doesn't fully commit to sending a double to Kevin Durant. This cut here, as we're going to see from Torrey Craig, as well as the eyes from Kevin Durant, allows for them to shift the sink man here, being Doug McDermott. He has to shift his responsibilities back to Torrey Craig because of this excellent gap cut, not unlike the cut we saw from Josh Okogie in the first rep. And then again, Kevin Durant's processing speed, his playmaking ability, especially from the mid-post, helps to make this team just a different type of monster. It operates from a different space on the floor, and he's able to beat the rotations, especially in addition to this timely and astute cut from Torrey Craig. Skips this right behind Gorgie Jang on the baseline, and he's able to give Biyombo an easy deuce. All right, and then again, as we're looking at them inverting the offense now, because they've got so many clean looks, so many high shot quality looks out of that, now we see the Spurs to start the second half overplaying their mid-post touches. So now what do you do out of that? Well, the Suns have built-in counters to everything a defense is going to try to do to them. And by nature of that, and with that in mind, we see them skip it to the second side. It's going to end up being a step-up screen here in the middle of the floor from DeAndre Ayton for Chris Paul. And as we kind of look back at Kevin Durant, what does he do after they don't get this ball to him in the mid-post? He's going to take, and the Suns are going to take full advantage of the help responsibilities from the initial look being the mid-post touch that they were looking at. They skip it, and then they quickly get into this pick and roll. And in addition to that, it's going to be Josh Okogie setting the exit screen. So Kevin Durant goes from initially being engaged in the mid-post to disengaging in the post and flowing into an exit screen on the other side of the floor. That's all accompanied by pick and roll from Chris Paul and DeAndre Ayton. They empty that bottom corner there, so that's another option if they really wanted to get into that, with Devin Booker spaced up high above the break. Nonetheless, looking back at the side that we're going to with Durant, he goes back into the exit screen, and he's able to, again, knock it down. Guess what spot? Again, from the left corner. And again, shout out to David, the great David. Again, the 4-point play on Twitter. If you don't follow him already, you should definitely be following him if you're following me. And this is just beautiful basketball, a great counter from this team. And it just really speaks to the space that they're flowing in just generally in the half court. If you take away something, they have a direct counter to it, and they get into their things in a timely and astute manner. And just the pace of their flow with Kevin Durant, it's just not much more you can say to it, man. It's just beautiful basketball. And then they get into another mid-post touch here. You see the Suns kind of respacing, trying to figure out exactly what they want to do. Look at this timely pass, though, from Durant. Just the shot quality. They're not going to make this attempt here from Terrence Ross, but the look, and you see the process playing out. This pass compromises the entire second side, the weak side for the defense. They get a wide open look off of the double team, which is exactly what you want, playing within an advantage. And, of course, Terrence Ross doesn't knock this one down, but the premise is there. And you see why it's just so effective for this team. And then as we kind of transition a little bit more here, we're going to see it's getting into the mid-post touch in a different manner. So Devin Booker is going to do it himself. This is called a Barkley dribble. He just kind of dribbles himself into the post. It gets the same attention and serves the same purpose as because He's gaining ground, of course, getting to the basket, getting into the mid-range. It's going to attract extra attention from the nail. They end up sending two to it. As soon as he does that, we see a stampede from Torrey Craig. And again, Craig is not going to make this initial look, but it's going to be a defensive foul as you see him get to the basket before Jane can step in and get into position, as you can see him in a restricted area. The Suns inverting their offense just gets such great looks and such high-quality looks. Whether they make them or not, the process is just extremely clean. And now we're just going to look at some of the two-man game reps that I'd like to see from yesterday. So we saw Chris Paul screening for Kevin Durant early in the second quarter, and we saw a good result from it. We got a little bit of a switch, and then they didn't force the issue on us, so they were able to get back to their original responsibilities after the show from Trey Jones. And he's able to go into isolation defense on Chris Paul, but Chris Paul's already in the mid-range, specifically at that right elbow. And that's a shot, whether it's with the live dribble or in isolation, that he's been knocking down at a high clip for the entirety of his career. And that's essentially a layup for him. And then we're going to see here, this time it's between Kevin Durant screening for Devin Booker in the empty side. They empty that entire side of the floor. And then they're going to get into generating a high look off of it. And then we're going to break this one back down after we see the basket from Ayton, because the process here is just beautiful. And I don't know how teams can really guard this, because it's an angle screen. So Kevin Durant's screen is angling for Devin Booker to go towards the sideline rather than towards the middle of the floor. But I want to look at Kevin Durant's rolling out of this. So he goes with the reverse pivot, which puts him in a position to kind of put more pressure downhill. And then Devin Booker hits him in the short roll. But because of the angle of the screen and the automatic show that's going to have to be given initially to Devin Booker, the angle for Kevin Durant to get downhill is there. And if he's able to play make on a short roll, which is untapped potential for him, it really helps to highlight his processing speed. So he's able to get the catch here. He knows that his man is not with him anymore. And he knows that the low man is going to then have to sink in to help out. And this is a great job from him processing that on the catch. Before he even catches the ball, he knows where he's going with it. And also, great process from DeAndre Ayton, putting himself in position to just be able to put more pressure on the rim. And before Kevin Durant can even have the full ball in his hands, he's able to catch it and just get it right over to DeAndre Ayton on a little bit of a high-low here. And then Ayton's able to finish this off. Should have went up with it initially, but he still gets two out of it nonetheless. And then on this last play here, I just like to see this. Again, we see Chris Paul screening for KD. They end up getting the switch, as you can see. And then they're going to end up not getting an initial look off of this just because of the flow of it was a little bit mucked up. But we're going to see Chris direct for Devin Booker to sprint the baseline and respace the floor, reshape the court balance. And as he sinks away from what's eventually going to, of course, be a double team, as we talked about early, on KD, especially from this position at the elbow, we need to see Chris take this shot. He already knocked down a handful of catch and shoots in this game, and he decides to kind of play with his food here within the advantage. He gets a good quality look, especially for him. He doesn't knock it down, but you see the process here. Again, blending pick and rolls with these mid-post touches and then playing out the advantages that those create for this team is going to be important to continue to track as we move forward. And it's just fun to see the Suns' offensive process and the manner in which they go about operating on the floor, especially from new areas. It's just been really fun to see, and it's going to be even more fun to see track as we see these games continue onward.